we are.
So I know people have had enough talking about this, but on the theme of Corona,
Oh, stop.
no, really, they announced this week that some say it's not true, but they announced that Corona beers went down in sales by like 30%. So I was thinking, wow, what's about 30%. But according to Snopes, which is a fact checker website, have you heard of Snopes?
Yep.
Okay, so you all believe in fake news, that means. So according to Snopes, is that how you say it?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Snopes or?
No.
I'm just joking. So according to Snopes, they say that it's not true, and actually the guy that owns the company said it went up 5% in sales, so it's all a lie. Well, if the guy that owns the company says that, I don't know. But one thing's for sure, and I did some research. Companies that call itself a name that eventually has some kind of epidemic loses its company. So there was actually a company called Diet. This is really true. It was a sweet that they said in 1988 would actually help you lose weight. It was a candy, and it was called Diet AIDS. And not long after, the whole thing came out, Diet AIDS lost its company, closed down. I mean, no one knows about Diet AIDS anymore, do they? So.
Oh, that's like there was this thing in Australia called fags. Do you remember fags? The cigarettes?
Yes.
They're like candy cigarettes. Yeah.
And then and it didn't get accepted, and that was it. And then there was something called SARS. There was like some kind of sauce called SARS, which also lost its company because when SARS came out. So, are people stupid? Sorry?
What about like the band ISIS?
Probably not very popular anymore.
I would never listen. There's a real, it's a real thing. Yep.
There's a string right there.
There used to be like a.
There you go. You just heard about it.
It's a prophecy.
It's a prophecy. So, many people said, "Hey, people are, Americans think Americans are stupid," and that's what people said. There was many reviews. People think we all think we're stupid. And everyone's laughing at it, and people are stupid because they wouldn't drink a beer because it's got the same name. That's ridiculous. But here's the truth, okay? We as human beings also work subconsciously as well as we work consciously. Our minds does things a lot of the times, even when we're not thinking about it. And subconsciously, even if I know that something's not for me, and you can see this, they've tested it in many other areas of life. When I know that this name is not good for me, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want to associate myself with it. It's like the name Adolf, I was just talking about it, the name Adolf was a normal common name. But now, that name has a very evil part to it. You could say, well, it's just a name. Well, that's how it works. That's how the world works. As soon as something is, so to speak, put in a red mark, so then we kind of red mark everything that's to do with it, that's associated with it. Even if subconsciously we know it's fine. We know it's fine. But our subconscious mind automatically rejects anything that's dangerous for us. And that's just human reality. And why am I saying that? Because we as humans need to know, from a spiritual level as well, that we've got to avoid anything to do with negativity, anything to do with the name of negativity, anything to do with the place of negativity. We are majorly impacted by negativity. That's why the Torah in Psalms, the very holiest book that Jews have, one of the holiest books that we have, it was written by David, and we're going to see it wasn't just by David. There was many prophecies involved in that book, but it's an amazing book to read. If anyone wants to find hope, just read some Psalms. It's amazing just to try and understand the words and the depth of it. The very first Psalms is Ashrei Ha'ish, happy is a human, Asher lo alach ba'atzat rashaim, who doesn't go with the advice of the wicked. Uvmoshav leitzim, doesn't even sit in their place that they sit, and he doesn't go on the path that they went on. Meaning, even if they're not around with me, right, it repeats itself many times because it's trying to tell me that even if I go on a certain path that other people went on, and they're not there anymore. I might say, okay, wait, I'm not even getting involved with them, but just by being on that path, being in that same environment, I want nothing to do with it. That's going to be a happy person. So we as humans have to remember that if I'm around some form of negativity, even if it's slight or in any way, I need to kind of avoid it completely at the fullest level. So on a spiritual, that's just a message I learned from this idea. Nothing to do with the virus itself, just the idea that our subconscious mind rejects things even though we know very well it's completely fine. But our mind says, reject this. And I think that's a very important thing. We've got to listen to that inner mind. There's many times in life where inside we deep down say, you know, this is really not good for me. I shouldn't be talking about this. I shouldn't be reading this again. I shouldn't be spending time looking at this again. Why am I doing this? Why am I? But then I keep doing it. You ever had that situation where you said inside of you, I should not be doing, why am I doing this again? Why am I watching this, I don't know, this show again, this political video again, right? And then debate. Why am I wasting my time on this? And then I say to myself, again, I shouldn't do it, but then I still do it. Why am I still doing it? So you've got to listen to that subconscious mind. The mind inside is really talking and it's saying, look, this isn't good, just move away, right? Or whatever it is. I think that that's a very important aspect that we can learn from this thing. Anyway, I want to move on to, just to get your attention, but I want to move on to the story of Purim. We started last week, and then I thought I gave the most awesome, fun discussion last week, but then it didn't record it. So anyway, no, never mind. So the guy that helps us is going to say, hey, it's not. So anyway, so I'm going to... Yeah, it's on.
How do you know it's on?
The red button's on and the volume is moving.
Yeah.
Okay. Chaz, it's your fault. Right, so anyway. So I want to take you through the story of Purim quickly and then take you to some of the codes and look, the story of Purim is very short when you just read the English translation of the megillah, and a lot of it is like, oh, this boring English. So, for me at least, I'd rather read the Hebrew than the English. I find the Hebrew more beneficial to me than the English. The English, I don't know what he's talking about. So I just want to take ourselves a bit deeper than the story that we're told in school, because there's many books that were written on understanding the Megillat Esther, the revealing of it. Do you know what the Talmud says? The Talmud says that if you had a dream, and in the dream you dreamt about the book of Esther, right? You have to be studying it to have that dream. But anyway, if you somehow dreamt of the book of Esther, it says that that dream is a sign to you that you're going to have a miracle in your life. Why? There's no miracles directly in the book. The book of Esther doesn't have miracles in it, but the Talmud says you're going to have a miracle. Because the book of Esther is all coincidences, which seem coincidences, but when you look at the general picture, you're like, this is a miracle. Okay? So I want to take you through the miracles of the story by telling you the deeper message behind everything that we learn. Okay, so we have this king. Do you remember when the story happened of Purim? I mentioned it last week, right? Last week I mentioned when about in Jewish history, not date, but when about generally did...
70 years after the first time.
Exactly, 70 years after the first temple, just before they walked into building the second temple, right? Achashverosh and Esther eventually get married, right? They get married in the story, and their child actually helps build, who's one of the heads of the Persian Empire, Darius, helps rebuild the second temple. Did you know that? The second temple wasn't fully in the Jewish power like the first one. And the Persian Empire was very much involved in allowing the Jews to move back to the second temple and rebuilding it. Okay, but the 70th year after the destruction of the temple, Achashverosh, this king, who took over the Babylonians who destroyed the first temple, this guy called Achashverosh, who had no lineage of kingship, who had no background of kingship, takes over the Persian Empire, 127 different countries. He's an extremely powerful man, one of the most powerful men in world's history. And he has this major feast. Do you know why? Do you remember the story? Why does he have this big feast? Does anyone know? He wanted to celebrate because he made the wrong calculation. He thought that the Jews are not going to go back to the second temple. There was a special prophecy in the book of Daniel and many other books that the Jews are going to go back to the second temple and they're going to go back and rebuild the temple. And he made the calculation. He said, look, the Jews aren't going back. God has left the Jews. There's no chance that they're going to go back and rebuild the second temple. I have won the Jews. So he said, okay, this was the third year of his ruling. And he made a huge feast on the third year of his ruling of the Persian Empire. How long was his feast for? 180 days. How many days is that? How many months is that?
6 months.
6 months. And 180 days started on the month of Nisan. Our rabbis teach us it started on the month that Passover is. 6 months later, you're going to have 3 extra days besides for 6 months. So it comes out exactly on the 3rd day of Tishrei, which is just after Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the new year. Passover to Rosh Hashanah is half a year, 6 months. Rosh Hashanah, the new year. 3 days after that new year, the 180-day party finishes. And then Achashverosh says, listen, my guys are all getting angry with me. His whole city was getting upset with him. They're saying, look, you're wasting our tax money. Taking all our money and taxes, and you're making this big feast for 180 days in all your kingdoms. You're insane. And everyone was getting upset. So he didn't want his people to get upset. So in his city that he lived, the main center of the Persian Empire, which is Shushan, right? In Shushan, he makes another feast for 7 days. And in that feast, he invites everybody. He made the most kosher feast for Jews. He made every type of meal that you can imagine. No one was forced to drink. They used to have in those days, one person was chosen with a huge cup. A huge cup they'd have in the middle of the feast. And they'd choose one guy. And they'd say, okay, this dude, he's a bit funny. And they'd bring him into the middle. You drink this whole cup. Chug. Massive thing. And they made him chug it down. And then he was the guy that everyone would laugh at throughout the meal. Right? So throughout the whole party, they would laugh at the guy in the middle. So the story in the Megillah, it says, Shtiyar kedat en ones. This time, he said, no, it's going to be according to law that anyone can drink and no one's going to be forced. No coercion. No one's forced to drink. Anyone who wants can drink whatever they want. And they drank. And not only did they had kosher drink, and they had drink which was older than the age of the people that were there. Can you imagine? So eventually, after 7 days, there was a separate women's party as well for his wife Vashti. She was the grandchild of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians, who destroyed the first temple. Achashverosh was not from Babylonians, he was from the Persian Empire, which took over during that 70 years. Anyway, I hope you're with me. So, this guy Achashverosh makes this huge party on the 7th day. Just going quickly over the story again. On the 7th day, he calls in. He has a big argument with his friends, and they all say, our women are nicer. The Parsiyot are not. Madayot are not. By us, we have good conversations about Shabbat. You come to our house. We don't talk about who looks nicer and who doesn't look nicer. That would be ridiculous. But in a religious home, in a home of Torah, in a home of that would be never in my life did I hear such a conversation in my parents' home. Oh, she looks beautiful. She doesn't look beautiful. Never in my life would we speak like that for my whole upbringing. There was no such talk. So I know that sounds weird, but in a Torah home, in a home of value, you don't externalize people in any way or objectify people. It's true that looks are important. Don't get me wrong, but you never objectify people in that way. And here in this meal, that's all they did. And that's why they went to Mordechai, who was the head of the Jewish people. He was one of the Anshei Knesset HaGedolah, one of the great men of assembly. You know that we have an assembly today, a congress or whatever. We also, in Judaism, we had an assembly of 120 different members of the Knesset, right? We had a great assembly. But they were the greatest rabbis that you can imagine. They knew all languages, and we'll see later on, they had to know all of Torah inside out. They had to have had a family already. They had very strict rules. These were the greatest of the Jewish people. So Mordechai was one of the leaders of the Jewish people, and Mordechai looked after this lady called Esther. In the meantime, anyway, before Esther comes along, Vashti, this feast for 7 days, there's this crazy feast going on, and Achashverosh is making this feast. When did the feast end? When was the 7th day? Happened to fall on Yom Kippur. And the Jews went to ask Mordechai, and they said, what should we do? Should we go to the feast, or should we not go to the feast? And Mordechai said, don't go. It's not life-threatening for the Jews to go. Just because you're going to appease him and make him happy, it's not good enough of a reason to go. Do not go. You will not be killed. There's no danger to the Jews. Don't go. And the Jews still went. And he said the same idea. This is a bad environment. They're not doing good things in there. What are they talking about? It's not a good environment. Plus, it's on Yom Kippur. And he took out all of the temple's holiest vessels. He took out everything that was stolen from the temple in this feast. On Yom Kippur, he made this massive party, and guess what happened? On that day, there was a decree made against all the Jews in heaven. According to Jewish teaching, on that day there was a decree made against all the Jews that they're going to be wiped out on that day. What happened on that day? Nothing. Vashti gets called in, the wife of Achashverosh. You with me? You guys with me? So the wife of Achashverosh, this woman, Vashti, was the granddaughter of the Babylonians. She gets called in, and he says, my wife is the most beautiful wife of all. Achashverosh says to his friends. And his friends says, well, you're the king. Of course you're going to say that your wife is the most beautiful. You spend hours and years treating her and making her look more beautiful. That's fake. It's just Hollywood. So he says, Achashverosh says, no. I'm going to bring her in without any clothes on, just with the crown. He asked to bring her in with the crown. Hey, how you doing? He asked to bring her within the crown. She comes in with the crown, without any clothes on the 7th day. And she does not want to come in. Why does she not want to come in? Because our rabbis teach that she had boils on her body, she had a leprosy, and she did not want to go into the house, into Achashverosh without clothes on. It's too embarrassing for her. On the 7th day of the 187 days that he was partying, Achashverosh on that night makes a decision, speaking to Haman. He speaks to Haman, his advisors, and Haman says, kill her. Have her killed. Right, we spoke about this last week. And guess what happens? He has her killed. Okay, that's basically the beginning story. By the way, on that day, on the 7th day, which happened to be Yom Kippur, the decree against the Jews came along, which said that they need to be killed. And what happens on that day? Vashti is killed. The Jewish teaching says that God brings a healing before he brings a punishment. Even though there was a decree, he wanted to set up a situation for the Jews to save themselves in case they change. So even though there was a decree to kill all the Jews, automatically on the same day, Vashti gets killed, and now Esther could take her place, opening an opportunity for the Jews to be saved. That's what we say. Whenever in life you see a closing, whenever you think, I made a mistake, there's no way of me getting out, know that a door has already been opened on the other side. Whenever you walk into a situation where the door is closing, know that there's a door that's opening for you on the other side. Makdim refuah lemakah. God brings healing before he brings the pain. That's a message that we learn from Vashti. Okay, I want to move on further into the story. So Achashverosh says, okay, I need a new wife. He gets upset. He forgets the fact that his wife Vashti was killed, and he gets over it, and he says, I need a new wife. He calms down, he stops with his drunkenness after 187 days of drinking, and he realizes, I need a new wife, and he calls in all the young women of Shushan and beyond, and he appoints officers to bring in all the women so he could see who's good for him. And they all go into many months, a year of cleaning different oils that they have to go through. And then 6 months through oils, 6 months through bathing and all different things before they can actually walk in front of the king, Achashverosh. Can you imagine what a living God this guy was, right? And hundreds and hundreds of women walk before him, and he doesn't get appeased by anyone. And eventually he finds out about this lady called Esther. Esther's the Jewish daughter, or the adopted child of Mordechai. Esther did not have parents. Her mother died at birth, and her father died before she was even born. So she never had parents, and Mordechai took her on. She was a very holy and special woman. It says, Vatilakach Esther. Esther was taken by force because she didn't want to go. Normally everyone would say, well, I'm going to have a chance to marry the king. A year of dressing, for her it was a punishment. To be a year through going through this show in order to show off myself to this man who I don't even want. She was taken by force, it says, because she didn't want to go, but she had to go. And she was told, and she made a promise to Mordechai that she will not say her background, where she came from. But it's not just that Mordechai didn't just want her to not say her background. Mordechai made a request that she doesn't say her background because he would find out that she comes from a royal family. And for Achashverosh, that was his number one request. He wanted to find a girl that was fit for him, that came from a royal family, because Achashverosh himself didn't come from a royal family. He was just a warrior. And he wanted somebody to come in from, like Vashti, who would take her place and would be someone that comes from a royal family. And if he would find out that Esther came from a royal family, he's going to for sure take her. So Mordechai made a promise that she's not going to tell him who her people are. And that's exactly what happened. So anyway, Esther, eventually after a year of training and getting ready she got into 2 different auditions. There was the first audition, first there was Haggai, who was one guy who was on top of it, who was checking everyone out. Then she moves on to another audition called Shashgaz, another whole place where she gets checked by him. Now she passed the first guy, she's gone in through the next guy. It's like the beauty contest. And eventually she gets brought in. And guess what happens? Out of all the people, Achashverosh says, I want her. Why? Vatisa chesed, she carried the vision of kindness. According to Judaism, beauty is not just on the external. Beauty is when you see a personality as well that's special. She had that's exactly what we say in a wedding. We don't just say that somebody's beautiful. Kama na'ah v'chasuda, how beautiful she is, but also how chasuda she is, how much kindness she has on her. Right? Sheker achen vehevel hayofi. Beauty on the outside alone is a lie. You have to look for Isha Yirat Hashem titalal. What is she on the inside as well? When you look for a relationship, you don't just connect 2 bodies together. Right? That lasts for a few minutes, and maybe that's it, right? But then you might say, okay, fine, I'll prove that I'm going on for a bit longer, maybe for a few months, maybe for 6 months, and then you'll swipe left for another one, right? So in Judaism, it's not like that. We don't look at somebody just like that. We have to look at somebody for who they are on the inside as well. Beauty is not just on the external, it is part of it. Don't get me wrong. But what's the inside? Where's the chesed? One of the first rules for dating, by the way, is to look for kindness in the other spouse. Okay, so somehow Achashverosh was attracted to this woman. She didn't even try, and she just followed protocol, but she never did anything extra to make herself more beautiful. She was just natural the way she was. And that was the most attractive thing to Achashverosh. He takes her in. But then Achashverosh says, who are you? What background do you come? She says, listen, I don't know. I don't have a background. I don't have a father and a mother. I don't have a background. Then it says in the story of the Megillah that Achashverosh went and redid another, he started telling her, listen, if you don't tell me who your spouse is, your family is, if you don't tell me, Esther, where your family comes from, I'm going to do another round looking for another woman. I'm going to leave you. So he was thinking he's going to threaten her. What did she say? All right. He starts looking. He says, I don't know. She said, I don't know. So he starts threatening her. He starts looking for more women. It says, Shenit. He went around looking for another group of women. But Mordechai was waiting. And eventually, Achashverosh said, I can't find somebody else. I think that this woman comes from a royal family. And he eventually sends out letters. He sends out letters to all of his officers, to everybody, with a special gift from the Queen Esther. So everyone should recognize that she's royal. And he sends out these letters to everybody and gifts to everybody saying, look, this is Esther and this is the Queen. So eventually that's the story. And let me just make sure I don't lose my track, because I want to just quickly move on before we walk into the story of the codes, which I want to show you. Okay? Oh, in the meantime, every single day, Mordechai sits outside the palace, and he's sitting there, and he's always waiting, making sure that he could see Esther, and Esther could see him. It says that Esther, it says in Judaism, your eyes should always be cautious to see spiritual things. You should make sure that your eyes see things that are spiritual. Your eyes should see people that are spiritual. Make sure that you are influenced by the people around you. That's why in Judaism we have pictures of Rabbanim, big scholars. We would hang their pictures up. Why? We don't put pictures of some famous Hollywood star. We put a rabbi. When someone walks in, it's like, okay, right? But we do that because you want your eyes to see and be influenced, again, by good. You want to have a good influence on you. And that's a very important thing. So every day Esther was in one of the most, can you imagine being in the house of Achashverosh, a man that spent 187 days partying, a man that treated women in the worst way that you can imagine? Mordechai's worried. This is a girl that was an almanah. Not almanah, she's a yatomah. She's an orphan. Please. This young, beautiful girl that comes from a very Jewish home, stuck in the house of Achashverosh. Every single day, Mordechai made the point to sit right outside the gate of the king. And every day, Esther would see him. And that would influence her to stay strong. Stay with the commitment that she wouldn't say her story, her background. So anyway, in the meantime, there were two people plotting to kill the king. Right? Do you remember their names? Does anyone know their names? Bigtan and Teresh. These two people that were plotting to kill. Were they stupid? I mean, there's a guy right next to you, and you're talking about plotting to kill the king.
They didn't know the language. He knows the language.
He knew the language. They spoke a certain language. They came from a specific place, a small little town. It's like a Bedouin town, and they spoke a language called Tursit.
Oh.
Can you say that? And they spoke this language, and somehow Mordechai knew it. They thought, who's this rabbi? He's not going to understand what we're talking about. But Mordechai knew it because, remember, he came from the special court, the highest Supreme Court of Jewish law, and he knew every single language. He knew 70 languages, including this language. Do you know why a member of court had to know every language? Well, according to Judaism, there was capital punishment. We can't do that anymore, right? But there was a capital punishment, very hard to enforce. But in order to give capital punishment, you can't rely on a translator. You have to hear the witnesses. And the witnesses have to be able to, I have to understand everything they're saying. So therefore, all of Supreme Court has to know all languages to know what the witnesses are saying. If I don't know the language, the whole thing is falling apart. There's no way of convicting somebody like that. So you have to know every single language. He knew the language. And he hears that they're trying to kill the king. What does he do? He tells Esther. He sends a messenger to Esther saying, hey, there's these two guys called Bigtan and Teresh. They're trying to kill the king. Esther quickly goes to Achashverosh and she says, I hear that there's two people trying to kill the king. And she says, do you know who told me? Mordechai, this man that's sitting outside the gate of the king. Mordechai. By her saying that, the Talmud says, we learn a very powerful message. Whenever you say something, you have to say it in the name of the person that you said. Whenever you say something to somebody else, Omer b'shem omro, say it in the name of the person that told you. Because you mevi geula leolam, you'll bring redemption to the world. If you say something and if you hear some wise thought, and you start teaching it to the public, under your name, that's not a good thing. It says that you should always, whenever you hear something, say it in the name of the person that you heard it from. Don't take the quote as your own quote. That's called pride.
Give credit to credit to.
Yes, give credit to the person that deserves that credit. And here it was deserving to Mordechai. And because of that, later on we're going to find out that Mordechai was saved and the Jewish people was saved. just because of that. So we see, if you give credit in a place that credit's due, then good things are going to happen. So eventually, God makes Haman equal and puts, this is already the 3rd chapter, God makes Haman just as equal. He decides to appoint Haman as the man in power under the king Achashverosh. He's going to be equal to the king of Achashverosh. Haman came from the Amalek family. According to Judaism, we mentioned this last week, before, whenever there's Jews moving into Israel, and this happened when we left Egypt. What happened when we left Egypt? We were walking our way through the desert towards Israel, and who did we fight before we got into Israel? There was a nation that tried to kill us. Who were they? Amalek. Okay? And again, later on, in the story of Purim, there's a nation called Amalek. Today we don't know who that nation is, but there's always this nation called Amalek that will try and destroy us before we enter Israel. And we are told that it happened after Egypt. We know that story in the Torah. It happened here in the story of Esther. And by the way, it happened in the Holocaust, because we know that the people that perpetrated Hitler and so on, the Nazis, according to Jewish teachings, many of the big writers, the Gaon of Vilna and many others, said that they are the descendants of Amalek. They are direct descendants of Amalek, those people that committed those crimes. We don't know fully who they are, but one thing we do know, somebody who tries to annihilate the entire nation as a whole and starts actually acting on it, we can guarantee that they come from this tribe called Amalek. So anyway, God said, Achashverosh, not God, right? He thinks he's God, right? He says, I'm going to make Amalek, this guy, equal to me, and he's going to take over the power of the Persian Empire. He's going to work with me. And he did. Haman came second in power, but Haman gets upset. Why? Do you remember why? Because
He makes everyone bow to him.
he wants everyone to bow to him, and who doesn't bow to him? Mordechai, right? Mordechai refuses. Why didn't Mordechai want to bow to him? The Talmud says, what?
He's not God.
Well, the Talmud says you could bow down to somebody as a human, but Mordechai, right? Because, you know, he's not necessarily God. He was created by God. I'm not proving that but Haman had a god hanging. He was a pagan, and he had a god hanging on his neck, and he wanted people to serve his gods, right? And that's his way of getting people to bow to him. And Mordechai refused, and that caused him to hate him. It says that he said, do you know what Haman said? He said, I want to kill this guy. I want to kill this. Who is this guy? He's not serving me. And then he said, okay, I don't just want to kill him. That's going to look stupid on me. I mean, I'm too important to care about one person that wants to bow down to me. So he says, you know what? I'm going to kill all of his people. And then he said, all of his people everywhere. And eventually he goes and he does a lot. By the way, Amalek is the numerical value of safek, which means uncertainty. Okay, the numerical value of Amalek is the word safek, which means uncertainty. And what does Amalek do? Haman did this. He said, okay, you know what I'm going to decide when the Jews are going to be killed? I'm going to do lots. I'm going to show that there's such a thing as coincidence. And Jews say the exact opposite. There's no such thing as coincidence. Everything has a reason. When you do lots, it's God. Haman says, no, it's me. It's a coincidence. I'm going to show that I can kill the Jews when I want to, and it's nothing to do with God. So Amalek, by definition, is an ideology that's, so to speak, completely against the idea of God. It brings uncertainty to the world. And the idea of the Jewish people is exactly the opposite. Okay, so we want to say that everything has a reason, that everything has a purpose, that everything is, right, is here for... They tried to say the exact opposite, and he did a lot, which happened to be the name of the holiday. What's the holiday called? Purim. What does Purim mean?
Lots.
It means lots, right? Pur. He pil pur, he did lots. Because lots can be translated in two ways. You can look at this world either as a coincidence or as a purpose behind everything. Jews look at everything as a purpose. The other way of looking at it is as a coincidence. And that's what Amalek stands for. So Amalek decides to do lots, and which is Haman. And he goes to the king Achashverosh and he says, listen, I'll give you money. Please let's kill the Jews. Achashverosh says, no way, we can't do it. Look at Pharaoh. Look at Look at Nebuchadnezzar. Look at all these people that tried to kill the Jews. I'm too scared. We can't annihilate them. I know what happened to all of the people before me. Don't do it. So Haman says, listen, I'm a guy, I read the stars, I know what's going on. And he did, according to our teachings. He actually knew a lot about stargazing and everything like that. And he could read, but he was wrong. And he said, right now, the Jews have a decree that they need to be killed. Was that decree true?
Yeah.
Yes. By the way, this was already 7 years. We're going to see this was not only 7, it was the 3rd year of Ahasuerus's kingship was when he made the feast, and that was when the decree. This happened on the 12th year. God waited 9 years before he actually brought down the actual decree in the physical world. The decree, whatever happens in this world, we understand already is decreed above, but it could have been decreed months or years ago. And it only comes down physically much later because things have the opportunity to change based on our free will. So it was already the 12th year of Ahasuerus ruling, and he decides, okay, I am going to, Haman decides, I'm going to draw lots. He walks to Ahasuerus. He says, please, let's kill these people. Ahasuerus says, no way, I can't. He says, listen, I see that the Jewish people need to be destroyed. And then he says, but that's what everyone else said. How do you know? He says, you have to know, right? He says, Yoshenhu, they are sleeping. Yeshno am echad, there is a nation. He says, Yoshen am echad, they're a nation that is asleep. They're not spiritual right now. Dateim shonot, they have different ways of living. Do you know what they do? They have this thing called shiur and paha. Do you know what that means? Shiur and paha. Do we have something called shiur and paha? It means Shabbat Hayom and Pesach Hayom. The Talmud says that whenever you go to them, you're like, hey, can you work for me? They're like, no, I can't. Today's Shabbat. Then the next time you ask, can you work for me? They say, no, it's Passover. And then you want to work for them, but they've got Yom Kippur. They don't follow the system. They have their own thing. You can't work with these Jews. They have these holidays all the time. So he kept saying, look, they're different. They are, he says, they don't get along. They don't get along. For the Jews to be destroyed, or for a decree, they can never be destroyed, but for a decree to come against them, they have to be separated. They can't get along. They're not getting along right now. Let's do it. So what does Ahasuerus say? He takes off his ring and he says, Haman, you do it. Right? And the Talmud says the most strange thing. Haman gives him 10,000 silver kikar of kesef, real silver bars. Right? 10,000 bars of silver. Can you imagine how much that's worth? He gives him a tremendous amount of money and says, listen, I'll do it. Here's the money, just let me do it. And Haman pays Ahasuerus. And Ahasuerus says, you know what? I'll take the money, but here's my ring, the king's ring. Have you ever gone to a transaction, you go to a store, and you buy something, and the guy says, look, here, take what you're buying so much from me. You know what? I'm going to give you the keys to the store. You can come in whenever you want. It doesn't make sense. You know, you buy something from a person, why would the other person now go and give you everything? It doesn't make sense. Ahasuerus says, here, take, because he hated the Jews just as much. He was just afraid. Okay, the story carries on. The word gets out. Mordechai is very nervous. He starts wearing sackcloth. He starts crying, and he starts screaming out. He doesn't cry in the streets, but he cries to God. He starts praying, and the Jewish people start praying. Esther hears about it. She hears that Mordechai is worried. She finds out what's going on. Mordechai says, listen, there's a decree against all the Jewish people. We need to be annihilated. You must do something. You must go to Ahasuerus. She says, I can't go to Ahasuerus. You can't walk to the king without being asked 30 days before. Do you know why that was a rule? Why was it a rule back in the day that no one, even the wife of the king, must not walk to the king without being requested first? And you have to be requested 30 days before. The wife of the king. What kind of life does he have? Right? You can't go to the king unless you've been asked to come 30 days before. He had a great Google calendar, and every 30 days before he had everything organized. Okay, Esther's coming tonight, right? And she's coming tomorrow morning, and we're going to have... He had it all written out. If she didn't come without being requested, she has to be killed on the spot. What kind of thing is that? Do you know why they lived like that? Because they were a monarchy. Do you know what life that meant? It meant that anyone could take away your life. When you're a dictator, when you're a person that's ruling and forcing your ruleship on others, anyone could take your life, and we've seen that, right? There's many leaders throughout history that were evil, that their own children killed them. Henry VIII killed his wives. I mean, and there's many people, Nebuchadnezzar, there's many leaders in the past that were killed by their own brothers or sisters or their own spouse, by their own children, because they're hated. They forced their way into everything. So that's how a monarchy worked back then. If you want to speak to the king, you have to have it organized 30 days before. Esther said, I can't go. He's going to kill me. So one of the most famous statements of the story of the Megillah, he says, if you don't go, I promise you, Revach v'hatzalah yavo mimakom acher. We will get relief, we will get saved from another place. Someone else will save us. But who knows if you came to existence for this moment? A person must say to himself, who knows when you have an opportunity, right, coming your way, and you've got an opportunity to take, don't let it fall by. Because who knows if this is the moment that you came into this world for. That was a very famous statement. He says, who knows if you don't take this, you and your household will be lost. You'll never be remembered. Because all the Jews will die and you'll remain with Achashverosh. You will never have any legacy. Who knows if this is your moment? And Esther says, okay, you know what? I'm going to go. And she decides to go, and she says, before I tell you that I can go, please, the Jewish people must fast for 3 days and 3 nights. The Jews fasted for 3 days and 3 nights. They were much more spiritual back then. And they fasted for 3 days and 3 nights, and Esther said, I will fast too. What happens when you fast for 3 days and 3 nights? Do you look as nice as you used to be? No? So that's worse for her. It's not better for her. But according to Judaism, we always know that in order for things to work, you have to do 3 things. We learned this from Jacob. You have to do physical effort, and you also have to make spiritual effort. Never think for a million years that it's all about our physical powers that makes us strong. You've got to do physical effort, but also a spiritual effort. Right? We learned by Jacob when he went to meet Esav, who tried to kill him. Right? He went to meet him for the first time after many years. He knew that Esav was going to kill him. He did 3 things. He sent gifts. Right? He prayed. And he prepared for war. Gifts, pray, and war. Doron, tefillah, and milchama. He did 3 things. Because in Judaism, we never believe that you could just pray alone. Praying alone, saying, I'm going to be saved because I pray, is not good enough. You've got to do both. You've got to do an effort. You've got to make an effort. And you have to pray. Okay? So that's what she did. And by the way, she did make an effort. When she actually went after 3 days, she walks towards the king's palace, nervous, not knowing what's going to be. Fasting for 3 days, she still wore the most beautiful clothes. That time, she dressed in the most beautiful way that she could possibly dress. Why? Because you've got to do both. Even though I don't look great right now, I've fasted for 3 days, I could barely walk, right? But at the end of the day, I'm going to make my effort as well physically and make myself look good as well. So she walks towards the king. And guess what happens? All the officers take out their swords. Right? They're about to kill her. Going to kill Esther. And Esther gets a prophecy. She starts saying one of the Tehillim, Psalm 22, which is the Psalm of Esther. Psalm 22 is Lam Natsech ala Yelet HaShachar. She says one of the most crazy prayers that you can imagine. And we prayed this prayer on the fast of Esther. What was the prayer? Avi ve'imi azavuni. My father and my mother left me. V'Hashem yazveni. And Hashem is going to gather me in. Hashem is going to save me. I have nothing else. She said, Avi ve'imi azavuni. Hatzileni micherev nafshi. Save me from the sword of my soul. Save me from this sword that's on my neck. And from here we learn that a person must always say, Afilu cherev chudam munachat al tzavaro shel adam. Even if there's a sharp sword hanging on the neck of a person, you should always never give up hope from mercy. Even if you're in the worst situation that you can imagine, you're thinking that that's it, my life is over. Don't hold yourself back from hope. No matter what situation you're in, don't hold yourself back from hope. And she starts praying all this prayer. Can you imagine? Aviva imi azavuni, what a powerful prayer. God's most powerful prayer is the prayer of an orphan. It says that if you cause pain to orphans, if you know that somebody's an orphan, doesn't have a father or mother. And by the way, an orphan is anybody who lost a parent before they got married. That's called an orphan according to Judaism. They could be 25, 30. If they lost a parent before they get married, they're considered, according to Judaism, a yatom. And according to Judaism, it's one of the most powerful. It says, if they cry because you make them cry, their tears go straight to heaven, and immediately something bad can happen. It's one of the most profound prayers that they can be, is the prayer of a yatomah. It's a very innocent prayer. It's a prayer of someone who's really in suffering. And she made that prayer, and at that moment, again, Achashverosh sees this chut shel chesed, a attraction of chesed, of kindness. And remember, Judaism believes that people are not just attracted to the physical of the inside. In fact, much more we're not just attracted to the external. We're actually much more attracted to the internal of a person. What are we already? We're just flesh. Flesh. It's not that attractive, trust me. Flesh isn't attractive. It's the inside. You try and marry someone who has a great flesh, but you can't see their face. Right? They cover their face with a mask, and you can never marry someone like that because you need to see the inside. Panim shows the panim, the inside of the person. We, by definition, deep down, look for the inside of the person as well. And he looked for the inside. He saw, according to Judaism, somebody, even if they think, there's times where we see somebody who you think, okay, they're not physically attractive, but they have something to do with chesed, this internal beauty. And at that moment, Achashverosh saw an amazing beauty in Esther, and he took down everything and he says, Esther, what do you want? What do you want? Maybe she's going to tell me what lineage she comes from, what her background is. Finally, maybe she likes me and she's going to tell me what her story is. So do you know what Achashverosh does? He says, come, what do you need? She says, I want to sit down with the king and have a feast together with Haman. You want to sit down and have a feast with Haman? What's Haman to do with this? And the rabbis say, she never said straight away, hey, please save the Jewish people. Because at that moment, Achashverosh would say, what are you worried about, Esther? You're my queen. I will kill all the Jews and I will keep you alive. Esther didn't want to say straight away, save the Jewish people. She waited. She wanted to put Achashverosh in complete suspense. So she walks in there and she says, listen, I want to sit with Haman in a meal with you. Now? Yeah, now. I want to have now a meal with you and Haman. So he calls in Haman. And they sit together. Finally, Haman comes in and they have a feast, a gorgeous feast. Obviously, Esther has it ordered and kosher. Right, and they sit together with Haman, and Achashverosh says, okay, Esther. He's completely confused. What does she want? Why is she bringing this guy? And he says, okay, what's going on? And what did Esther say? Please, tomorrow, I feel like I can't tell you now. Tomorrow, let's have another meal with Haman, and we will discuss more of what's going on. Can you imagine? What would I do, right? I mean, Achashverosh killed his other wife, Yeah? What? Okay, you take the table, pick it up, get out of here. Tell me who your people... For some reason, Achashverosh didn't do that. And he was burning inside. What is going on? What's going on? And for hours, can you imagine that night, how he slept? He couldn't sleep. That night, the king couldn't sleep. And by the way, it says the king, it doesn't just mean, according to the midrash, whenever it says just the word the king, it means God as well. Whenever it says the word King Achashverosh, it means King Achashverosh. But in the story, many times it says just the word king. So it says on that night, the king couldn't sleep. And it meant Achashverosh. We understand that he literally couldn't sleep. There was a malach, an angel, right? According to the midrash, that was constantly waking him up. And he couldn't sleep, but it also, on a deeper level, on another level, he also couldn't sleep because he was worried of the suspicion of Esther. What's going on with this Haman and Esther? Maybe Haman's trying to kill me. He was constantly concerned that someone's trying to kill him. Why would Esther suddenly come to me, put her life in danger, to meet with me, and then to have Haman sit with me in a meal, and then have Haman come tomorrow? It doesn't make sense. She put her life in danger to sit with me and Haman? What's going on with Haman? Maybe Haman's trying to kill me. He starts thinking all these things. And then he says, maybe why would no one tell? Maybe if Haman was trying to kill me, I have plenty of friends. Maybe one of my friends will tell me that Haman's trying to kill you. But no one told me, nothing. I don't know what's going on. So he opens his book of Chronicles, his book of all the things that good people did to him in the past. He opens it up and he calls out and he says, okay, what's going on? And he asks one of his servants, the cook, he asks him to start reading to me the book of Chronicles. Maybe there's someone that did good to me that I never paid back. Maybe there's someone that could have told me that Haman's trying to kill me, and he never told me because he knows he doesn't like me. No one likes me. Achashverosh is worried. And the guy starts reading the book, and he opens the book, and he sees on the page the story of Mordechai, who saved Achashverosh from Bigtan and Teresh. This Jew, Mordechai, who sits at the gate of the king, who saved Achashverosh from these two guys who plotted to kill the king. He says, I need to help them. Meanwhile, Haman was the happiest guy in the world. He couldn't understand why Esther wanted to have a feast with him and Achashverosh. He went home, made a massive party in his house, announcing that he is loved by Queen Esther. And Achashverosh, he is the man. And he's so happy, he makes a huge feast in his home. And what does he do? He builds a gallows for Mordechai, because on the way home, when he was going home that night, he sees Mordechai again. He's like, I can't take this guy. I need to destroy all Jews. This is driving me crazy. I have everything. I have everything, but this is not worth it to me. All my pride, all my wealth, all the love that I'm getting from Esther, and I don't care. No, this one man is not bowing down to me. That's what it says. Righteous people, they're happy with what they have. Righteous people eat, and they're satiated with the food that they have. But it says wicked people, always their stomach is missing something else. Right? Even their stomach, they're like, oh, I need something else, some more sugar, more this. Please serve me this. Please serve. A righteous person has everything and doesn't need more. But this Haman had everything, but he said he went to his own destruction because of one man that wasn't bowing to him. He goes home and he tells them, so they say to him, listen, do you know what you need to do? Build a gallows, let's hang Mordechai. Builds a massive gallows, 50 amot high. Do you know how high that is? 50 meters. The whole Shushan sees that Haman is redoing his backyard, building this massive show in his backyard with a gallows which is 50 stories high. They're all going crazy. What's going on? And in the meantime, Achashverosh hears from his cook, he finds out that Haman is building a gallows at that night that he couldn't sleep well. He hears that Haman's building gallows to hang him. He's like, I can't believe it. Someone's trying to kill me. He's going nuts. Maybe Haman is trying to hang me. And then on that night, Haman can't wait for the meal the next day. He couldn't anticipate waiting for the meal the next day. So do you know what Haman does? He goes and decides to walk into the palace of Achashverosh. That night, he says, he loves me anyway. And he walks in the night, in the middle of the night. He hears Achashverosh is busy reading the book of Chronicles, and he says, who's at the door? They say, it's Haman. He says, oh, perfect, bring Haman in. And they have security around Haman. They bring him in. And Haman wants to tell him, listen, I have the gallows and I want to hang Mordechai. As soon as he's about to open his mouth, Achashverosh says, 1 second, I have a question for you. What do you do to somebody who's been very kind to the king? What do you do? How do you glorify and honor somebody who's kind to the king? Haman thinks, for sure he's talking about me. For sure he's talking about me. So Haman says, do you know what you do? you put him on the crown, you put him on the horse of the king, make him wear the clothes of the king. Ahasuerus is going nuts. He's like, what? He's trying to take my place. It's insane. You put him on the horse of the king, make him wear the crown of the king, and you have somebody walking around the entire city saying, this is what is done to the person that the king loves. This is what is done to the person that the king loves. And that's what you should do, going around the entire city. So Haman, Ahasuerus says to Haman, you know what? Do exactly as you say to Mordechai. You walk around with Mordechai sitting on the horse, put him on give him my clothes, the king's clothing, give him my clothing, my horse, my number one chariot, and put Mordechai on it, and take him around the entire city, and you go around and do exactly the words of what you said. He says, which Mordechai? What do you mean? Mordechai? What do you think? Which Mordechai I'm talking about? Well, there's many Mordechais. I know a lot of Jews called Mordechai. Which one are you talking about? No, the Mordechai that's outside the palace. The one that sits by the gate. No way. Haman was so embarrassed by the thought. He goes to Mordechai, takes the clothing of the king, takes the horse, but is so embarrassed by the thought, he decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wear the clothes of Mordechai, and everyone's going to just think that I am Mordechai walking around the city of Shushan. So he takes the clothes of Mordechai. As Mordechai is taking off his clothes, Haman takes that clothing and puts it on himself. And he gives him the king's clothing to Mordechai to sit on the thing. And he thinks to himself, oh, now everyone's just going to think that I'm the guy on the horse. And everyone's going to think that I'm Mordechai walking around because I'm dressed like a good Jew. So Haman runs around, this hate of the Jew, a decree to kill all the Jews on Purim, is now running around the entire city of Shushan with screaming in a Jewish clothes. Imagine all the Jews walking out. They're like, what's going on? Haman, he's wearing Jewish clothes. He looks like a rabbi. Yeah, that guy is it's a joke. And then they see Mordechai. They're like, what's going on? So Haman walks around the entire city screaming. Everyone's waking up. What's going on? They see Haman walking around. As he walks past his own house, Haman walks past his own palace, who's a massive palace of its own. He walks past his own palace. His daughter sees from on top Mordechai, dressed as she thinks Haman is his daughter, is Mordechai. Mordechai is Haman. She sees the guy who's pulling the horse, right? And she thinks that's Mordechai for sure, screaming in the streets. So she throws the entire garbage from her house on top of him. And it's her own dad. Eventually she realizes it's her own dad. And it's told that she even killed herself from the embarrassment of knowing that she killed her own father. And she embarrassed, from the embarrassment of knowing that she embarrassed her own father. And anyway, Mordechai, eventually, after this entire story, he comes home. He comes home the next morning, and he is avel v'chafui rosh. He's mourning because of what happened to his daughter, and Haman comes back mourning and sad about what happened to his daughter. He walks back into his own home, and within no time he has to already run back with Mordechai, with the Jewish clothing. He has to run back to the palace. The officers come running in from Ahasuerus' officers, the palace. The officers of the palace come running in. They grab Haman and they say, you've got to go back to the palace. There's a meeting right now in the morning with Esther. We're having a meal. It was the next day. They had a commitment to have a meal with Esther. Are you guys following me in the story? So Haman gets grabbed and taken back to the palace and embarrassed, dirty, after being thrown all that garbage on him, spending a whole night. He's tired, and he gets taken back to the palace to sit with Esther. And he sits there, and finally Esther says, Ahasuerus, finally he's waiting for this moment, and he says to her, Esther, my dear, what is it that you want? And she says, listen, Nimkaunu ani v'ami, my people. Ahasuerus is extremely nervous, very nervous from Haman. But he plays the game. And she says, Esther says, I've been sold, me and my people, and we've been decreed to be killed. Ahasuerus says, who on earth will try and kill my wife? And he's thinking of the person that killed his previous wife. Who on earth will try and kill my wife? How dare they? Who is it? And she looks at Haman and she says, Ish hara'ah zeh, this Haman, evil Haman that's right here. He's trying to kill me. And Haman's like completely shocked, everything twisted the other way. He tried to destroy the entire Jewish people. By the way, he sent letters and papers as soon as he made that decree to the entire world, saying if anyone sees a Jew, they need to be killed on the 13th of Adar. On the 14th of Adar, they need to be killed. On this month, for an entire year, Jews were worried about that day that's coming up. But can you imagine the level of anti-Semitism that was in the air? And Jews were fearing all around the world. There was this decree, these documents that went around, leaflets everywhere saying all Jews will need to be killed on the 13th of Adar. And that was the decree of Haman. And Haman's here, sitting in front of Achashverosh, and he's like, look, you've got to go. Haman stands up, and he starts looking at Esther, and he starts pleading with her. See, he starts looking at Esther, and he pleads with her, Esther, please, don't do this. And in the meantime, Achashverosh is going nuts. He walks out of his palace, and he goes outside to get fresh air. He's like, this man, this Haman, he couldn't believe it. He's trying to kill my wife. The second time, he walks outside to calm down, and as Haman's begging to Esther, he trips over and falls on her. And Achashverosh walks back in, he sees him lying on top of her. And he says to her, excuse me? Even to lishchovet ishti b'bayit, you're trying to be with my wife in my own house in front of me? And at that point, Charvona, who is Elijah the prophet, dressed as one of his officers, comes in and says, by the way, he says, let's kill him. Achashverosh screams, let's kill him. And this officer says, who's dressed as an officer, he's Elijah the prophet, says, you know, he's also got a huge gallows that he built in the middle of the city, that he built to hang Mordechai. Let's use those gallows. And that's exactly what happened. Mordechai was saved. Mordechai came in power, took over Haman's home, and Haman was killed, and the letter was sent around the world. The king made an announcement that I can never change a decree that I made in the past, but what we could do is make a new decree. And the new decree will be that anybody who tried or was thinking of killing the Jews on the 13th of Adar will now have the right, we have the right, the Jews have the right to defend themselves. We can't make a rule to annul, to remove the decree that was already made in the past, but we can make a new decree signed by the king that anyone that was planning to kill the king will be killed, will be destroyed and killed on the 13th of Adar. I just want to quickly tell you the language, okay? We have a few minutes. The language, because this is the final part, and this is the codes of Purim. If you see, there's a certain section where the names are written differently, okay? And these are the 10 names of Haman written here. They were the main leaders in killing the Jews. And let's read the English. For Mordechai was not, number 3, was now powerful in the palace, and his fame was spreading throughout all the provinces. Right? Mordechai was now famous. The man Mordechai was growing ever more powerful, and the Jews struck at their enemies with the sword, slaying and destroying. They wreaked upon their enemies. They destroyed all their enemies. In the fortress of Shushan, the Jews killed a total of 500 men. And they also killed, and these are the 10 names of Haman, Pashandata, Dalphon, Aspata, whatever, these 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamadata, the foe, the enemy of the Jews. And they did not lay hands on the spoils. So if you look at the language here, these are the 10 sons of Haman that were killed. Ish ve'et Pashandata, ve'et Dalphon, ve'et Aspata. If you notice, there's 3 letters that are smaller than usual. Okay, there's the letter Taf, which is smaller than usual. Shin, which is smaller than usual. And Zayin, which is smaller than usual. According to Jewish law, when you read the Megillah, these 10 sons have to be read in one shot. The reason for that is because they were all killed at the same time. They were all hanged at the same time. But look at this, section number 4, Esther says to the king says to Esther, in Shushan, the capital, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. He asked her, how many did you kill? She says 500 men were killed. These were the enemies. Esther again says to the king, if it's okay for the king, may you allow the Jews tomorrow, and in Judaism the word tomorrow means in the future, like it says, when your son asks you tomorrow, Ki yishalcha bincha machar, by Passover it says, when your son asks you tomorrow, tomorrow means the future in Judaism. Esther said to the king, tomorrow, may you allow us in Shushan to do the same thing and to kill the 10 sons of Haman on the wood. May you allow us to kill again the 10 tomorrow, which means in the future. He already just killed the 10 sons of Haman. But then Esther makes the same request to the king again. Doesn't make sense. Plus, the words ve'et is extra. In Torah, like it says, when it says honor your father and your mother, kabet et avicha ve'et imecha, the word ve'et in the Torah is always superfluous, and it has a reason. And by the way, it says the king, it doesn't just mean, according to the midrash, whenever it says just the word the king, it means God as well. Whenever it says the word King Achashverosh, it means King Achashverosh. If you count Tov Shin Zayin in Hebrew, that was the year of 1946. Vav is the 6,000th year, right? According to Judaism, we are now in the year 5780, which is Tov Shin Pei.
Which is 5.
Right, we are in the year Tov Shin Pei. This was in the year Tov Shin Zayin, which is 1946. Okay? And what happened in that year? There were 10 people that were killed that were the sons of Haman. Who were they? The Nuremberg Trials. Has anyone watched the movie of the Nuremberg Trials? No. So in 1946, there were 10 main people that were involved in causing the Holocaust, Nazi officers that were the leaders of causing the Holocaust. And there was actually 11 at first. And in the 6th of October, 1946, which actually happened to fall on the last day of Hoshana Rabbah, on the last day of Sukkot, which is a very spiritual day. It's like Yom Kippur. On that day, they were eventually decided to hang them, which is very rare. Normally, in Germany, after the war, the Americans only killed any of the Nazis by shooting them or electrifying them. They never hanged them. But for some reason, after the Nuremberg Trials, they decided to hang them, different than anyone else. So they decided to hang them. On the night before, one of the guys called Göring killed himself. One of the guys actually killed himself, and there was only 10 left to be hanged the next day. So originally it was 11, one killed himself the night before, and there's only 10 left to be hanged the next day. And this is in the New York Times. Göring ends his life by poison. 10 others hanged in Nuremberg prison for Nazi war crimes. Doomed men on gallows pray for Germany. And these 11, you can see in small, you've got that 11 Nazis calm on last day. The next day, only 10 survived, okay? And there was one guy who was crazy. Everyone else was quiet. There was one guy who was crazy. His name was Julius Streicher. He was a Nazi officer as well. Julius Streicher was the one guy who kept on speaking and acting in a very strange fashion. Before they were killed, they asked each one, what do you have to say? No one said anything. Julius Streicher screams out, Purim Fest 1946, and jumps to the gallows. Screams out the world. Purim Fest 1940. It wasn't on Purim. It was on the 6th of October. October is not when Purim happens. That's around Sukkot time. 6th of October was when he was hanged, and he screams out Purim Fest 1946 and jumps to the gallows. He was acting in a very strange way, and you can actually hear, they have recordings and everything. It was written down in the newspaper of that time. Here I've got the copy of the Time paper that it actually says it. Can you see clearly in the corner here? It's not a very clear page. With burning hatred in his eyes, Streicher looked down at the witnesses and shouted, Purim Fest 1946. Purim is a Jewish holiday celebrated in September, actually more in the March area. Okay? An American officer near this then asked the man if he had any last words, and Streicher snarled, the Bolsheviks will hang you one of these days. Okay? But he said Purim Fest 1946, which is a very strange thing. Did he know? No. We, according to Judaism, know that these people were the part of Amalek. They are part of the nation of Amalek. and always before the Jews enter Israel, Amalek, we are told that they will come against us to try and change us, to try and stop us. And they did that in Egypt. They did that before we had the Second Temple, and they also did it just at the end of the Holocaust. Very strange and very interesting. But here is we believe that there's a lot of hidden stories in the story of Esther, because it's all about revealing the hiddenness of the world, right? It's a hiddenness of the way that God works with evil in this world. Okay, so anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. And I know that was a bit long, but I'm sure it was worth it. Did you follow? Okay, you can take the sheet home and study it more. Thank you, thank you.